Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode. And today I'm absolutely thrilled to have with me TD Motley. TD, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about it and really looking forward to talking with you.
I wanted to start with, though, a book, which is The Art of Farming Sketches of a Life in the Country. Could you tell us about storytelling and illustration as you put them together?
Of course, yes. I've got the book with me right here. I'll show you what the cover looks like. As a kid, I've been drawing since I was 3. I drew the same picture over and over again through first grade till I got really good at it. It was always a barnyard with a cow and a pig and a horse and a rooster on the roof. And so I grew up in love with illustration. And so my first exposure to art really were through what we called the funny papers, especially in the Sunday funnies. And I had heroes like Pogo and different comics like that. And by the time I was in the 3rd, 4th grade or so, I was drawing my own versions of those comics. So in the 3rd grade, I could draw you Pogo and Albert the alligator, all those guys. I learned a lot about line as a child, how to create an illusion of a recognizable shape with line. And that was a kind of a limitation in the way in that with cartoons, you really only need 3 values, a light, a medium, and a dark. So when I got to college and got into drawing classes, the teachers would just get so frustrated with me because they would want me to have 5 or 6 values, make things look realistic. And I would be like, 3's enough, isn't it? So my trajectory then discovered Mad Magazine. And so Mort Drucker and all of those great cartoonists became my heroes. And so I borrowed from their styles and that. And at about 14, I hope this is answering your question, okay? When I was about 14, we were living out in the country, of course, and I bravely put together a packet of my drawings, my characters, and sent them off to Bob Taylor, who was my favorite editorial cartoonist at the time. He worked for the Dallas Times-Herald. And I sent him a packet of my stuff, 14 years old. Several weeks later, I go out to the rural post box and pull out this package. And in it were my original drawings that I had sent Bob Taylor, and then his drawings of those drawings, and then all kinds of lessons, handwritten lessons from him, telling me to vary my line weight in the lines. It was like an education in a package. And I can't tell you what that did for me at 14. At 14, I was like, I knew I wanted to be an artist. I was going to be an artist all my life. But that was such a shot in the arm by one of my heroes. And then I was pretty much off and running.
We're going to stop there because we're going to unpack a lot of that.
Okay, all right.
First of all, we admit the enemy and he is us. The greatest line from a comic strip ever. And that came from Pogo.
Yes, what a guy. Yeah.
I grew up in Houston, and on Sunday morning, they read the funny papers. And my dad worked 6 days a week, so the only time I saw him was on Sunday.
Yes.
And that's how I learned to read.
Yep.
Was reading along as they read the funny papers. And his favorite strip was Pogo.
I love it. Yes. Yeah.
But it doesn't end there because I was one of the most voracious collectors of Mad magazines ever.
As if I have a son who has the whole collection. He's got all of them.
Yeah, I hauled mine around for 40 years before I sold them. And Mort Drucker was one of the greats. They were all great.
Yeah.
You can name any one of the Mad artists, and
Davis.
They were just fabulous. So you're the first person to mention Mad Magazine on one of my podcasts, and you're first person to mention Pogo. So double kudos.
Excellent. And I was born in Beaumont, so I was in Beaumont reading those funny papers as a kid.
Is that where you grew up as well?
I was born there, and I moved all over the state, really. I was one of those kids who got moved around a lot. But my family are all from Hill County, which is basically just below Waxahachie down to Waco. And so I grew up with all of that. I grew up with aunts and uncles and both sets of grandparents in towns like Mertens and Irene and Frost and Milford. And then, of course, in Beaumont. We moved from Beaumont when I was probably in the 3rd grade. So 1st and 2nd grade, my love of reading certainly was initially inspired by the funny papers. But I have to credit the wonderful first and second grade teachers at L.R. Peach Elementary in Beaumont, because they gave me such a love for reading and for writing. I really enjoyed. First grade was block letters. Second grade, we were doing cursive. And man, for a kid to learn cursive, it's like your thoughts just flow. Cursive is like some AI invention or something. And that really, I had teachers take interest in my writing and drawing abilities from a very early age, first grade on.
Let me speak or delve into a little bit about Bob Daniels, because almost every artist I talked to had a mentor or someone they looked up to who gave a word to them, who gave them lessons, gave them something that really spurred them on in their own passion. Could you talk about, you said what it meant to you to get that packet back from him, but could you talk about really how that helped you understand maybe I can do this?
Bob Taylor was the
Taylor.
cartoonist. Absolutely. And mine started early at Rosemont Elementary in Oak Cliff. Miss Hattie Wilbur was the art teacher, and she recognized that in me, that desire and that just passion to make cartoons. I had my own cartoon strip, comic strip. And Ms. Wilbur arranged for this really interesting, she would put together a group of kids from Rosemont who wanted to help me. And on Saturdays, usually, for all of the seasonal events, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, etc., St. Patty's Day, there was a small department store on Jefferson Street in Oak Cliff. And she made arrangements with the owner of the department store that we did all their windows for those seasonal holidays with all of my cartoon characters. And like Walt Disney, I would first in soap, I would draw the characters in outline for the other kids to fill in with colors. And I'd tell them what colors I wanted. I felt like Walt Disney in the fourth and fifth grade. And she gave me such a shot in the arm. I had a wonderful meeting with her after I'd finished my MA in painting. And she was delighted, of course, but that gave me a great shot in the arm. And then when I was 18, and that continued on through school, I was the art editor of my high school yearbook, et cetera. That I got to create the mascot for our school. They still use it today. At 18, there was a coffee house in Dallas, and I always have to explain to my students that a coffee house is not a coffee shop, but a coffee house is where people play folk music, read poetry, and drink a lot of coffee and smoke a lot of cigarettes back then. And Ron Shipman, bless his heart, who passed away here, probably 6, 7 months ago. Ron Shipman was the owner, and everybody came to the Rubaiyat to sing folk songs. So there I got to meet Odetta, Bud and Travis, all these fabulous folk singers that I was buying their records and stuff. And at 18, I became the resident artist of the Rubaiyat. And so I did my paintings are on the wall. I did all of his menus. I did his fancy sign and sort of Persian-like lettering outside. And so I was the 18-year-old resident artist. And at the same time, the 18-year-old resident folk singer was Michael Martin Murphy. And so Michael and I have been friends since 18. Everybody calls him Murph. But so he did one of the nice blurbs for my book. We've kept in touch over the years. And that gave me a huge shot in the arm that I got to meet all of these famous folk singers and, in a sense, take a date to that place. And I was kind of famous at 18.
Let me transition over to your storytelling and ask you to tell us a little bit about that. And I say that because when I write fiction, my process is it plays out in my head and I simply record what I see. I think about it, but it's just like I'm reporting what I see. Is that your creative process or is yours different?
The Art of Farming is my first work of fiction. I've written a lot about art and a lot about farming, as it turns out, for different publications. But all of that has been nonfiction, I would say mostly academic and instructive, and teaching everything from soil sustainability to how to draw a tree. It's been, in other words, the purpose was very clear and I had a lesson to teach. I think they're good articles. But on the side, I have always toyed around with fiction. So I actually wrote my first short story, which I expanded into a fuller short story, was called Goodnight Irene, about the little town that I grew up in, that my mom and dad were born on neighboring farms just outside of Irene, Texas, there in Hill County. And so I wrote poems and I wrote little short vignettes about people that I knew from my childhood all of my life, but just never really thought about publishing it. And so when I had a little farm in Farmersville for a while, and I wrote more like letters to the editor, but sort of became like a little bi-weekly column. And I wrote about experiences on the farm. Those articles also had political edges. If I was really upset about the Trans-Texas Corridor or something like that, that was included. That is not in the art of farming. The art of farming is not about politics. But so I had, over time, I'd written probably 90 or so of these short articles. And a person who became a very good friend was a famous food writer named Sharon Hudgens in McKinney. And Sharon became one of my fans and boosters and guides and coaches. And Sharon and my wife, Rebecca, have been after me for many years to write this book about the art of farming. And my process is it took me about 9 months to put together the sort of to combine the content of some of those articles into some new things that I wanted to do. Come up with these characters that I invented. They're composites of a lot of people that I grew up with and a lot of people that I've known in my art and farming life. And met Lawrence Steffi, talked with him a little bit about what I would like to do toward the art of farming. And he liked the idea, and the rest is history. He did tell me that a number of his publication colleagues, other publishers in that, at some dinner or whatever they were having, and he brought up that, and they talk about their different projects and that, and he was talking about this new project that he had going called The Art of Farming, and he explained it to them. And he said to a person, they all advised him not to do it because it just had too many arms coming out of it. What is it about art? Is it about farming? Is it about animal, livestock, whatever? And he had faith enough to do it, and it's done very well, and I think it is appealing to people. The process of putting the book together is really, I want readers to have a conversation with the protagonist, with Sam Bartlett, the artist/farmer, who is the caretaker of all these animals. And I wanted to do it in first person. I know that's one of your questions that you wanted to discuss a bit. I wanted to be in first person because I want it to be like a conversation. I want people to both hear the words and the thoughts of Sam Bartlett, and sometimes even in real time, as if just kind of something spontaneous just came up and Sam makes the observation and you're there with him to hear him talk about this $800 worth of watermelons that the coyotes have just busted open to get water out of, that sort of thing. And so for a long time, I struggled with this long before I met Lauren, in thinking about putting these ideas together into a novel. And because I wanted it to be first person, and I wanted the voice of the protagonist to be the voice of the narrator, and I didn't have a lot of confidence in my ability to write dialogue, frankly. That actually happened pretty quickly, and I got over that pretty quickly. But the inspiration for that was, there's one of my favorite writers is Walter Mosley, who came up with the Easy Rawlins Private Eye series. And Easy Rawlins is a black private eye who everything's in first person, and all of the narration and the exposition, everything comes from the mouth of this private eye. And and I wound up reading all of those, and it dawned on me one day, there's my solution. I'll just make Sam Bartlett it's all going to be first person. You're going to talk to him.
So obviously many books have pictures, many books have illustrations. But what I was really intrigued about your book is you're the illustrator.
Yes.
And are the illustrations a part of the story? Do they help explain, or do they actually carry the narrative forward in their own visual manner?
I think both, because certainly the drawings, the ink drawings in the book are really portraits of animals that I have cared for. They have different names, of course, but they are line drawings, portraits of those animals, and they're in the because of my love of cartooning, I think I give a sense of the personality of each of those animals. And at the beginning of each chapter, we've included one of those ink line drawing portraits of a farm critter that's going to be featured in that chapter. That's the idea of the structure of using the drawings that way. But the drawings all preceded the book. In other words, all of the ink drawings that are in the book are actually from my farm sketchbooks of years before, of me just drawing sketches of the animals that I cared for and that appeal to me, like Saul, who's the main antagonist in the book. Saul was a wonderful little, about a 30-inch tall. I don't know how many hands they'll be up to his withers, but anyway, he's a real short guy, little miniature Sicilian donkey. And he lives his days to outwit this kindly artist farmer who cares for him to figure out how to, can I get that feed door open and get into the feed room and get some more cubes, that sort of thing. But those were all drawings that preceded the book. And as I wrote the book, writing about a life in rural Texas on the farm, on a small acreage farm, those animals were all there with me because that is part of my biography as well.
How did you make the transition from a visual creative artist, i.e., your drawings, to a written word creative artist, or is it almost seamless for you?
It was seamless. And I think the vehicle for that, Tom, was the comic strips. I had a wonderful friend at Rosemont and at Griner High School. And he and I, every afternoon, we would work on we had our own version of Mad Magazine that he and I drew, the same size, pages, etc. And he and I, it was just a wonderful outlet for two kids in Dallas trying to comment on the irony of advertising and politics and everything else that was going on from the minds of 11, 12, 13-year-old boys. And I truly think that like you, one of the most important reasons for me to learn and love reading as a kid were comic books and the funnies. And that's what I always wanted to do. In fact, as a teen, I really had planned on being the next Walt Disney by the time I was 30. That was in my thinking. So for me, even though most of my mature painting work that's shown in museums and the like, and those kind of important venues have been very large abstract paintings, 7 by 9 feet, 8 by 10, 5 by 8 feet paintings that are abstract. I have a serious side, my fine artist serious side, that loved painters like the work with Helen Frankenthaler and Morris Lewis and these great mentors of mine in abstract art. But along with that, at the same time that I made large abstract paintings, I was teaching college students how to draw. I was continuing to draw myself. My wife has kept track of all of my sketchbooks back to my earliest days. And I have always drawn what I was seeing in the world and then made interpretations of it, like turning a sketch of an Araucana rooster into a character, a personality in that bird, and then writing some things about that image. When I first started college, my heroes were all the great illustrators like Tom Lee, for example, one of my great heroes. And as Tom was an illustrator and a writer and illustrated all of his own works. When I was a freshman in college, there was a professor, Carl Sutton. He and his wife, Elizabeth, took a lot of us more or less country kids under their wing at North Texas. And they had a little modern house there in Denton it was the first house I'd ever been in that actually had art in it. They have a Picasso print and stuff like that. My family, honestly, I love them all to death, but if there's not a cow in the picture, then it's not art. And so the Suttons took a bunch of kids. We all have kept in touch with each other over the years. And they really encouraged us all in many ways. But one way that was so important to me was they gave me a copy of Tom Lee's The Brave Bulls. This is actually the copy long ago. And his a first of all, his illustrations are brilliant, but also his compassion for the animals depicted in The Brave Bulls touched me so much from the very first. That was so I was a freshman in college. I read it that year, and I have read every year. I reread this book, and it is, I think, central to the art of farming and to whatever I do in the future with fictional books about rural life and animals and that. When I was a young man and first read the book, I really identified with the great bullfighter, Luis, who drove a yellow convertible and always had beautiful dates in the convertible with him. As I got older, because I do read it every year, it's one of my favorites, usually around the holidays. It's just such a concise, filled book. And as I got older, I began to identify with Eladio Gomez, who was the little director of the local arena there in Cuenca, Mexico. And he was hated in his town because every venue that he put on, either he had a good bullfighter and a bad bull, or he had a good bull and a bad bullfighter. And so The Brave Bulls is about this miraculous event occurs that he brings the best of both together in this one particular bullfight in the arena. And the only catch is that the bull is very ugly, very hairy, long beard, and a broken tail. But turns out to be the bravest bull in the world. And it's just, and of course, all of his illustrations carry along with that. So that's what I hope that the drawings do in the art of farming. And the cover is my painting called Cornfield at Sunset. I've painted a number of variations of that particular scene. And it is as most of us here in Texas, wherever you've grown up in Texas, we do have some pretty incredible sunsets, sort of from any direction that you look.
TD, what do you have either in the pipeline, in the works, or maybe even just up in your head for the future?
I'm working on the sequel now for the art of farming, and have this interesting. When we got the first set of galleys for the art of farming, I was talking with Lauren about what I wanted to do next. I have 3 books in mind that I would like to do. And I've done a lot of compositional workshops and that since I retired in 2016. A lot of work like that out in Abilene at the CCA and work with the Grace Museum. And I would like to do a book on composition, kind of like Strunk & White's Elements of Style, that little book that you probably had in college that taught you how to write. I want to do a book like that on composition. And then I want to do a book on drawing in nature. I had great fun last year. I went to the annual conference of the Texas Master Naturalists there in College Station and did a presentation of them on composition in nature using photography or sketching. And then the third book is I want to do an autobiographical piece just about my sort of oddball farmer artist life from earliest days. And when I talked to Lauren about that, he said, that sounds great. He said, but first of all, you're going to have to do a sequel because we had great hopes for the art of farming. And so that's what I'm working on now. I'm through chapter 4, and it'll be a little bit larger than the art of farming, but not much. Same kind of gentle read, I think. The characters will be more developed. The characters, I want to be careful about. I want to present readers with characters that they can see and feel a relationship to, but I don't want to get so specific that they become portraits of individuals. In other words, I might say something in the sequel about my grown freckle-faced daughter, but I don't want to go much beyond that, say something about her sculpted features or anything like that. And Sam Bartlett, I want people to be able to see him for themselves, and I'll give you hints about his overall appearance and the things that he cares about. But the things that he cares about are much more interesting to me that I want to tell about him than how he looks, if that makes sense.
It does. I want to change the focus a little bit with asking you about the phrase, dreams never die, we just get older. What does that perspective mean to you at this point in your life?
I think that, well, I'm very interested in dreams, period. In fact, in the art of farming, my blue tick coonhound, Murph, actually has a dream where he flies. So I'm very interested I think dreams are very important for us. And often the muse will wake me up at 3 in the morning. I'll come out of a dream where I was dreaming about a painting or some of the writing, and I'll get up and get right to work on it. So I think dreams are important in that aspect. But as I've told thousands of students over the years, stick to your dreams. You don't know what crossroads are coming out there ahead of you. You don't see them yet. You want to prepare yourself the best you can so that when you come to that, what the Greeks called a heuristic moment, that those heuristics where there's an intersection of a whole bunch of things that you didn't even see coming and they're not your doing, that they just come together and you have an opportunity because you have dreamed yourself being there and you have prepared yourself to get there, and you never know what's waiting for you there. First of all, stick to your dreams. I would say that most of the serious art majors that I taught over the years shared a commonality in that they all drew from a very young age. They just did it as a passion. They just drew and kept at it. But I think but the other part of this advice that I would give students is don't chase the herd. Don't be in a hurry to develop a style, either in writing or in art. Don't be in a hurry to develop a style that you think some critic is going to approve of, or you've read some critic's writing that you really like, and you decide, okay, I want to create something that will please that person. I do not do that. If you look at you have to make art is unique in the world anyway. My family at large respected the fact that I was a teacher, but I'm talking about all my farming family, they also were always they couldn't quite figure out why anybody would make a major out of art. Do they actually have an art major in college? That was like, agriculture is understandable, but why would anybody major in art and get degrees in it? And I think that if you stick to what is challenging you, improve all artists and writers know the very thing that they need to improve on. You're your best teacher. If you want to be an illustrator and you're not very good at drawing hands, don't put the hands behind all of your characters, draw them. And if you're not willing to make an ugly drawing, or if you're not willing to write an ugly sentence, you're not going to write a good one. You're not going to get there if you're not willing to have that in your experience. And I think that when I was in high school, my high school counselor, the main counselor, told me that I couldn't go to college because my math scores were not good enough. My high school principal, who didn't care much about art, anyway, all of the messages I got were, you're not going to be able to go to college. And don't even try that. Thank the Lord, I ignored that and became an art major in college. I think that in art, as in many fields, you may have to work at some other job while you get better and better at the art. If you can't find somebody who's going to pay you for your art right now or pay you for your writing, then you might have to tend bar or wait tables or be a printer or not that's a career anymore. But artists, either in writing or in art, find a way to stay true to themselves and keep making the art. And many examples of artists who did not make it, so to speak, until their 40s and 50s and 60s. And I do think stay true to yourself, follow your dream, and do not chase the herd.
TD, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted to connect with you, find out more about your art, find out more about your writing, or connect with you on social media platforms, what would be the best place or places for them to go?
I'm on Instagram. It's just at Tom D. Motley. That's Tom and D as in David, Motley. At Tom D. Motley is my Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn as Thomas Motley. And I'm very active on both of those venues. And if you're interested, if you just put in on the internet, Thomas Motley, artist, Texas artist, author, a number of things will come up, including I write for an art publication called Art Spiel, Spiel, and the publisher of that magazine did an interview with me that just posted Monday morning at Art Spiel. And let me look here real quick. Utopia, EUTOPIA is another site that I write for, and you can find my articles at Utopia. But the LinkedIn and the Instagram sites are a good way to get in touch with me, and I'd love to hear from folks via those venues.
TD, I greatly enjoyed myself. I can only say that we will continue this conversation.
Excellent. I look forward to it, Tom. Thanks very much.